Hello, I'm Alex from Fontain Motors. This is the newest in our buying guide series of videos with a very little bit of a difference. We're talking about the 2003 to 2007 S4, B6 and B7 generation cars. Not just how to buy one, but also why you should buy one, why you should buy one today. If you're in the market for a fun Audi, a lot of the obvious candidates today have got a little bit out of reach. If you want what the first car everyone goes to, B7 RS4, for a really good one, you probably need 20 grand or more today. If you want an R8, RS2, they're 40 grand. Prices are higher than they were a couple of years ago. They've probably got further to climb as well. Then you get into the maintenance of cars like that, where they have some pretty exotic components, sometimes difficult to get parts for. Brakes are expensive, tyres are expensive, bespoke suspension bits cost a lot of money. This little beast behind us gives you probably 80% of a B7 RS4 for an absolute maximum of half the price. They're a little bit of an unsung hero, they're a bit of a bargain. Now really is the time to buy one before everybody else realises quite how good they are and quite what good value they represent.
Fontain Motors, the go-to place to buy, sell and maintain exceptional Audis.
The B6 and B7 generation S4 were an amazing engine with a very useful and practical car wrapped around them. You simply don't get with the modern small turbo engines, as good as they are, the soul, the noise, the personality of a traditional, normally aspirated V8. And that's exactly what you get with an S4. They're also very, very usable in that if you pick an estate car, there's no reason you can't use it every day for family stuff. The saloons look great, the convertibles are wonderful at this time of year. Certainly buying one isn't without its risks, but the faults of these cars are very well documented. The support community around them is first rate. And a lot of the things that you'll read or watch on YouTube or see in the magazines and the forums about the horror stories, they're probably exaggerated. They really, really aren't as bad as some people would have you believe. Factor into that as well that the purchase prices of these cars are very, very low. The risk is mitigated. You can have a really exceptional one for 10 grand as an absolute maximum. Audi launched the B6 generation S4 in 2003. Initially, it was available with a saloon body style or an estate. The convertible came on a short while later. Again, at launch, it was 6-speed manual with the introduction very soon afterwards of the 6-speed Tiptronic automatic transmission. In 2004, for the 2005 model year, the car got a facelift that's known as the B7 generation that you see behind us. The body styles continued, saloon, Avant and convertible. The gearboxes continued as well, 6-speed manual or 6-speed Tiptronic, and they were available through to the end of 2007. All B6 and 7 generation S4s used the same normally aspirated 4.2 litre V8. It's a chain-driven 40-valve unit, 5 valves per cylinder, as Audi were using a lot of at the time. They all produce the same quoted output of 344 PS, or metric horsepower, which coincidentally is exactly 1 PS more than a contemporary BMW M3 made. A cynic would say Audi did that on purpose. Gearboxes. Throughout production, choice of 6-speed manual, the standard unit, or a 6-speed ZF torque converter automatic. The 4-wheel drive system is slightly changed for the B7 facelift car, where it got the slightly newer version of the Torsen 4-wheel drive system that altered it from a 60-40 front-to-rear torque bias to a 40-60 front-to-rear torque bias. All cars have permanent full-time Quattro 4-wheel drive though. As standard, what did Audi include? As a lot of German cars at the time, not a great deal, unfortunately. So a B6 car on its standard kit, you got 18-inch alloy wheels, electric Recaro seats in the hardtop cars or electric sports seats in a convertible, xenon headlights and half leather. Everything else was an optional extra. B7 didn't change a great deal in terms of standard equipment, still half leather, although you got bi-xenon headlights rather than just on the dipped beam in the earlier car, the slightly revised four-wheel drive system mentioned earlier, but other than that it was the same. Electric seats, xenon headlights, 18-inch wheels and half leather. What makes a B7 different to a B6? We've touched on a few of the differences already, but the big ones are all cosmetic. Audi changed the front-end styling of the car quite significantly to the single-frame grille type that most of the range changed to at that time. New lights, new grilles, new bumpers, same at the back of the car, restyled rear end, new tail lights, and B7 generation cars also moved to the quad-exit exhausts that every S-car's had since then. Desirable options. What did buyers look for at the time? What do buyers look for now? What's popular? What's nice to have? Palette of colours really hasn't changed a massive amount, and it's quite personal. What you like is what you like. There were probably more reds and things sold than there are today, but if you fancy something fairly modern, a black, a grey, a blue, they're not difficult to find. Interior colours, you got either black or lunar silver, which is a sort of a off-white magnolia sort of a shade. Half leather was standard. You could also have half Alcantara in a two-tone effect if you wanted, or a full leather interior. Again, personal preference. The leather tends to wear pretty well. The Alcantara can bobble very slightly, but unless it's really bad, you can generally bring it back to looking nice with the same bobble gun you'd use on your jumper. Goodies and gadgets, as we discussed, the standard kit list was quite short. The things that you'd want today are really the same things people wanted when they were new. It's nice to have the auto lights and wipers. It's nice to have parking sensors, cruise control. Heated seats were not standard in S-cars then as they are now. Well worth having. There's satellite navigation. Still works, looks great, although it's a dated system. It definitely is the nicest looking of the stereos in the dashboard. Bose speakers, definitely well worth having. And there were various other small options as well, things like memory seats, although they're not that common or easy to find these days. Exhaust. There was no factory sport option for either of a B6 or B7 S4. Standard system sounds quite nice. A lot of buyers at the time and now wanted to hear a little bit more of what is a really beautiful sounding engine. At the time the cars were new, and now for that fact, Miltech is the brand that you'll see come up now, probably the most often. They make some lovely sounding systems. If you're looking at a car that's already fitted with an aftermarket exhaust, do ask what it was, in that a lot of the people selling them offered a non-resonated option, basically a straight-through exhaust that deleted the centre section. They drone and blare. They're really not nice at speed. Make sure you can live with it if you want a properly loud one. I far prefer the systems that retain the centre resonator section and just let the V8 sing a little bit more, let you hear it at its fullest. What goes wrong with S4s? Let's deal with the elephant in the room first, and what everyone on every forum tells you is absolutely guaranteed to ruin your day and cause a remortgage. The timing chain. And a lot of what you're going to read about this is wrong. Straight up, if your car needs its timing chain and guides replaced, today it'll cost you here about £3,000. Again, as we talked about earlier, if you hold in mind that these cars can really be bought quite cheaply now, even if you are in for a timing chain, you're still in for not even half what an RS4 costs. Compare that to, say, putting brake discs onto something like a B7 RS4, you're talking £2,500 for that alone, for brake discs. All S4s, B6, B7 generations, although affecting the earlier cars more so than later ones, the timing chains can suffer issues. When you cold start the engine, it is normal to hear, just for a flash, just 1 or 2 seconds, a very slight rattle from the timing chains as oil pressure builds up and tautens the chain. If that rattle is excessive, i.e. it's more than 1 or 2 seconds, or it's loud, or it carries on, or you're hearing rattling when the engine's running. If the timing is out, you're getting engine lights and faults around that. It, generally speaking, points to the timing chain. When we renew them, we change the chain, the guides. There's one guide in particular that is notorious for breaking. Even Audi know about this one, and later V8s, like in the RS4, use a metal guide rather than the plastic one in the B6 S4. They fit absolutely fine, and once you've got your new chain and guides installed, it's fixed. You're also adding, by doing that, a good chunk of value to the car. The convertible top. So if you're looking at an S4 Cabriolet, all Cabriolets have a fully electric roof. They can suffer some problems. They're not generally horrible to fix. A lot of the time, these cars are quite lightly used. You know, somebody may not even drive them at all through the winter months. Go to start the car up in the spring, battery's completely dead, pop a new battery in or charge the old one, and the roof does something funny. It'll open halfway or not close or just flash up errors on the dashboard. And if it is just battery related, very often they can simply be recoded and they come back to life absolutely fine. So if you're not using it through the winter, maybe think about a trickle charger. Up from that, the micro switches, so the little sensors that tell the car what position the roof is in, can go wrong. They're inexpensive. If the roof has a more serious problem, so it is mechanically not working, motor that drives the pump, the motor itself is the most common failure. They're inexpensive. And if the pump has failed, there's no need to buy a new one because they are expensive. They can be rebuilt. The actual fabric of the roof itself is generally very good quality. You will see some slight furring of the fabric on the folds of the roof. It shouldn't be excessive. In an extreme case, something like a rip or a tear, you know, something's horrible's fallen on it. There are companies now who supply really good quality aftermarket replacement tops. One other thing with the roof is actually in the boot. The soft top storage box that folds down when the roof folds down. If someone has, say, shoved a box or a bag into the boot that's far too big, the storage box that drops down to make room for the folded roof can break. So if you're looking at an S4 Cabriolet, have a look at the soft top storage box in the boot, make sure it works. Bodywork and interior, generally, they're pretty good. The B6, B7 generations of A4 have got a well-earned reputation for being pretty tough, and cosmetically no different. Outside the car, and you've got to remember that the youngest of these now is 14 years old, you really should just be talking cosmetic wear and tear than actual problems. Obviously have a good look around the car. Any vehicle of that age is not going to look like it's brand new, but you want to make sure that it's pretty good and any repair work has been done for cosmetic reasons, not covering accident damage. Corrosion shouldn't really be an issue, and if you are seeing rusty bubbles, look really carefully, as it might be pointing to signs of poor repair work, cheap aftermarket panels, things like that. Interior of the car, again, they stand up pretty nicely. Unless an owner's been horrible to a car or it's done loads of miles, the surfaces wear fairly well. You can see some marking on soft touch surfaces like the door handles, some light scuffing on seat bolsters happens. If the car's got Alcantara, again, you can sometimes see that bobbling, but normally sorted easily. Two complaints that any A4 owner will tell you tales of. The armrest break and the glove box doors break. They just do. They're not expensive parts. Leaks, oil and coolant. S4s leak both of those things sometimes. Most common oil leak is probably the cam cover gaskets. They get old, the gaskets dry out, they leak a bit of oil. If they've been left unchecked and they're leaking a bit more, you can get some oil on the exhaust manifolds, which you'll know about because it smells like burning oil. They're not too bad to sort. If you were, say, having an engine out to do the timing chains, it's an easy and sensible thing to do at the same time. Coolant leaks, most commonly. Both generations of car use two small auxiliary side radiators. The bottoms of these radiators corrode, bulge, and will leak coolant. Again, they're not too bad to replace, it's just bumper off. Whilst we're on the subject of oil, Audi's V8 does like to burn some. Officially, They can consume up to half a litre in 1,000 kilometres. Keep an eye on it, check it once a week, particularly so if you're doing more miles or you're using the car quite hard. It's completely normal. They use some oil, they always have done. We find that switching from the standard 530 grade of oil to a 540 can improve this as well. Knocks and creaks and strange handling behaviour. Like most Audi's multi-link suspension setup, number of bushes, joints, ball joints that now are at least 14 years old, and a lot of them are done over 100,000 miles. They might not be bad enough that your MOT tester is going to flag them as an advisory or a fail item, but they do soften and wear with age, and they do spoil the way the car drives. Top arms, particular culprits, but these are pretty much just standard A4 parts. None of them are particularly expensive. You can do a really thorough overhaul of the suspension for not a lot of money and have the car handling exactly like it's supposed to. RNSE navigation. So from about the middle of 2004 all the way through to the end of production, the RNSE or DVD sat-nav option was quite popular. They do have their problems, they are fixable. Very, very common to see an error popping up on the screen, the car complaining that it can't read the disc. Sometimes you get lucky and cleaning the laser will bring some life back out of it, but more often than not, the laser itself is worn or has failed. New ones are available. If you're seeing other errors popping up on the screen or the unit's not working at all, it can be that the motherboard has failed. Again, replacements are available. And lastly, the screens from the factory had an anti-glare coating that is quite easy to scratch. If someone's been a little bit careless cleaning it at any point, the coating can come off. You can simply polish it so that the coating's gone, but the screen is then quite shiny afterwards. But again, replacement screens are available. The air conditioning, make sure it works. If the system is regularly used, occasionally serviced, ideally left running all year round in the automatic setting, it shouldn't give you any trouble, but it is worth testing it thoroughly to make sure it's behaving, as if it was left unchecked and you had a compressor failure, there's quite a lot of labour involved in getting to it to replace the compressor itself. Clutch and flywheel, manual cars obviously, powerful four-wheel drive car. The clutch is the weak link in the driveline, but for good reason. It's a damn sight cheaper to replace the clutch than replace a differential or a gearbox. They last fairly well. They are generally up to the power, but they don't last forever, particularly if a car is driven hard or even driven carelessly. They're reasonably expensive to replace, but not insurmountable, and there's no reason they can't last over 100,000 miles if they're used with a little bit of care and respect. The ignition switch. If your S4 is sometimes a little bit recalcitrant, doesn't do what it's told when you turn the key, or even when you take the key out, it doesn't do what you expect it to do, and the lights stay on or the stereo stays on, it can point to a failed or failing ignition switch. More common in period than it is now, in that Audi did revise the part, and once they're replaced with the later one, they don't tend to go wrong again. Overall parts availability for B6, B7 generations S4s is excellent. It's really, really good. Most stuff is still available from Audi. Being an older model, some things are discontinued. You know, you might need to order an odd piece of trim or things like that Audi don't bother stocking anymore because they haven't sold the cars in 15 years. However, eBay, forums, owners groups, availability of used parts for all A4s of this age is first rate, and most stuff is really cheap when it comes to things like consumables and suspension components. Most of it's still available from Audi, but you can also buy really good quality aftermarket parts for a lot less than Audi would charge you for what's often exactly the same bit in a different box. General maintenance, starting with simple stuff. Oil servicing, every 12 months, no more than 10,000 miles if you are using the car more, but a lot of owners these days don't use anything like that much, so stick to 12 months. We also recommend using a 5W40 oil rather than the 5W30. Regular oil changing, really important for the health of the engine, and also using the 40 grade does reduce the amount of oil that they burn. Inspection service after 2 years, or again for a higher mileage user, no more than 20,000 miles, so you're going oil, oil and inspection, oil, oil and inspection, rolling on from there. Spark plugs and air filters. Actually, the factory maintenance table shows a 60,000 mile interval. But if you look at the spark plug that comes out of an S4 after 60,000 miles, they're clearly not so happy. We'd say stick to a shorter interval like the newer V8s have of no more than 40,000 miles or 6 years. Same for the air filter. After 60,000 miles, they look pretty grubby. Change them a bit sooner than that. Brake fluid, 2 years. Pollen filter's the same, 2-year interval. Gearbox oil for the 6-speed Tiptronic. Factory maintenance table shows that as a sealed for life unit not requiring any maintenance. These cars are a little bit older now, worth taking care of them, and a little bit of preventative maintenance here is probably a good idea. If your automatic S4 is on its original oil, or you don't know if it's ever been changed, particularly if it's something you're thinking of keeping for a good while, getting an oil change done on the gearbox can be a good idea. Thanks very much for watching this buying guide video. If you found it useful, or it's inspired you perhaps to take a look at an S4, they are really wonderful cars. You need not invest a huge amount of money to get something that has character and personality in spades. You never get bored with the exhaust note. There's no reason you can't use them every day if you want to. They really are the perfect antidote to a world of downsizing, hybridization, EVs. It's something you don't get anymore, we'll never see them again, and now's the time to have one because they are a fantastic bargain. You can get an exceptional example for 10 grand. You could buy a pretty sound example needing a little bit of work, bring it up to a really good standard, add value to the car, still come well under that amount. And you even see good cars coming up at your 5, 6 and 7 grand. It's an awful lot of car for the money. We remember them very fondly. I think they're going to make a bit of a resurgence, and you never know. Their values, as people do go out looking for V8s before they're all gone, may well even increase a little bit, like you've already seen the more obvious candidates, your RS2s, RS4s do. If this video has been helpful, give us a like, give us a share. If you're thinking of buying an S4, selling an S4, or you need some assistance in maintaining your own, we'd love to hear from you.
Fontain Motors, the go-to place to buy, sell and maintain exceptional Audis.